Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Best of Pedalshift. On this edition, we are talking about yoga for bicycle touring with my partner of now 16 years, Kimberly Wilson. She is the former owner and the founder of Tranquil Space Yoga Studios in Washington, D.C. At the time we recorded this back in 2017, she still was the owner-operator, and I was actually the general counsel of the yoga studios. So it only took us 70-some-odd episodes to talk about yoga on this podcast. And she definitely, as I'm sure you will agree, classes up the joint a little bit when she comes on the show. One thing that I think is really important to take away from all of this is that yoga isn't necessarily for everybody, but I find that it can be helpful for me while I'm on bicycle tour for both before and after a ride. So take a gander at all of this. One thing that we did not talk about that I definitely want to make sure that I throw out there for you is that she really recommends something called the 6 movements of the spine. And I've got a special yoga practice that is in the original show notes. That's pedalshift.net/073. Check that out because I find that to be some of the best pre and post stretching, basically. It is yoga to basically get my back reset both before and after a ride. Really, really good stuff. And I've got a few videos featuring Miss Kimberly from through the years. And this was just a really fun thing to be able to kind of merge our episodes, merge our podcasts a little bit. I am a not infrequent guest on her show. I'm on it every 50 to 100 episodes or so, but this is the only time that she's ever appeared on the Pedalshift project, and I think she did an awesome job, and I think you will enjoy it too. So without further ado, let's listen to Kimberly all about yoga for bicycle touring. So I am pleased to be sitting here with one of the great yoga teachers in Washington, D.C., and frankly, one of my favorite yoga teachers of all time, Miss Kimberly Wilson. Hello, how are you?
Hello, thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. Full disclosure, as many of you know, Kimberly is my girlfriend of, what do we have? 13 years, 13 long,
forever.
Beautiful, wonderful years. The reason why I'm bringing Kimberly on the show again, and you were on a fairly recent episode within the last 6 months or so, but you were afar. It was when I was in Portland.
Yep.
So now I've got you in front of an actual microphone, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the magic of yoga and how you can, how that can be a really helpful thing for bicycle touring in particular, or any kind of real lengthy endurance sport. But of course, this is a bicycle touring podcast, so obviously we'll do it through that kind of a focus. Just as a sort of a bit of a background, why don't you tell the Pedalshift listeners sort of what your background is in yoga and how you found it and all of that other good stuff?
Sure. So I've been practicing a little over 20 years now, and I found it in the mountains of Colorado when I was in my early 20s, and then I moved to DC in 1996, and then I started practicing and then opened a studio in 99 and began training teachers, and yeah, yoga's been a big part of my life for over 20 years now. And yeah. And, I think yoga, whenever I think about it for bicycle touring, or I think about it for, honestly, any of your listeners really for day to day, even if they are just bicycle commuters, to the office, of how powerful it can be. And, the one big thing that comes to mind, particularly if you are about to start a tour, or even jump on your bike to go to the office, is like having a little mini ritual before you get on. And it could just be taking a few deep breaths. It could be, as you put your stuff in your basket or your panniers, for those of you who don't have like a really cute basket on the front of your bike.
We have slightly different bicycle equipment.
Right.
Let's just put it that way.
Right. But as you put it in, it's like, really kind of being mindful of that. And as you sit on your seat, like feeling your seat on the seat, little things like that, I think can really help to ground you into the moment and into the experience. Because really, as a biker, you have to be incredibly aware. You may be listening to podcasts or doing other things while you're biking, but you have to really, really be aware of all of your surroundings at all times. And so the practice of mindfulness, I think in particular, as you get on your bike and before you start your journey, is a really, really important one. And of course, the breath is everything.
Yeah, that was funny you should mention that, because that's what I was going to say was, a lot of people look at yoga and bicycling as sort of like, oh, well, this is the warm up or the cool down or something like that. And it's very focused on the muscles. But what I found, in my sort of limited use of yoga as a total amateur, despite being with you for this long, I'm still total rank amateur when it comes to yoga. But like it's the mental aspect of it and the centering aspect that I find to be really integral to my bicycling experience, because I find that when I'm on a bicycle tour, I find that really meditative. I think that it's the closest I get to a really good meditative state. I'm really aware of what's going on. And I think the yoga can really help set me up for that. So I thought we would share all of those various elements of it for the listeners here. So thank you for helping with that.
Sure.
What would you say is sort of the for someone who's brand new, has never been exposed to yoga before, what would be sort of a good sort of first step for integrating that into bicycle riding? Whether it's a warm up, whether it's a centering, what kind of a thing would you recommend?
Well, there's two things. I would say definitely sun salutations, which, will provide a practice that for listeners, right?
Yes.
Where that, I'll walk you through the sun salutations, so it's like 12 steps. I won't say it's simple because it really depends on, I'll say it's simple. It's not easy. That's what
There you go.
So, and that's really great because it's like a full body experience. And I think too, particularly with biking, the lunges and the down dog, also helpful. The other thing that I would say that's probably really important is getting centered. So, I think of myself as I'm biking to the office many days. I'm like, dashing out the door, get there on time. And so I'm like leaping onto my bike and racing down. And, that's just not kind of the experience really that I think sets you up for success with regard to really being present and mindful of everything around you and frankly enjoying the ride.
Yeah.
Isn't that what it's all about?
Totally. You and I have both used the term getting centered. And I wonder if you could describe what that means to you.
Yeah. So getting centered is not leaping on your bike and dashing down the road
opposite.
with wet hair and a bagel in hand. It's like you're actually, you leave some space. You've got some time to get there. You take a few deep breaths before you get on the bike. You maybe even set an intention for the ride, or you set an intention for your day, so it's just like maybe getting centered. A way to look at it is just a little more intentional. And one way, in a yoga practice, we have, like, say there's an hour practice, we have the first 5 to 8 minutes is getting centered. And it's really just sitting and noticing your breath. So maybe it's just as simple as when you get on the bike, you notice your breath and you're just aware.
It's intentional transition is how I've always thought of it. That it's making sure that you're not just going directly from wet hair, throwing the bagel in the bag, and then jumping on the bike. It's going, okay, well, I'm transitioning now from, having this attention being focused very much on small things here in the house. I'm now going to be going on a bike, and if I'm going to be in a bike lane and I have to be more hyper aware, or it's just being ready to transition to going out into the world, just to use that example. So intentional transitions are such a huge part of all of this. In a bicycling touring context, I know when I'm going out on the road, especially if it's more of a highway, there's going to be a shoulder there, but there's a really big transition from going from this docile campsite with maybe the waves crashing in the background to having to be a little bit more hyper aware from a safety standpoint. So having that intentionality, that transition, that centering is super important. What's from a physical standpoint, what do you think is probably a good way of setting your body up for success using yoga for bicycle touring?
Yeah. So I would say definitely with the sun salutations is kind of step one.
Can you kind of just give a brief description of what that is?
Sure. So it's 12 poses, and you begin in mountain pose, and you come into a forward fold, you go into a lunge, then downward facing dog, which many of your listeners will probably know because they've seen it
they've
or
seen
practiced
yogurt commercials
it.
with
Yes,
it.
they've seen, or vodka commercials. And so it's an inverted V, and that one is actually really, really good for your hamstrings and your calves. And another thing too for bikers, because that might be too much. You may not want to get down on the concrete or something and do a downward facing dog. You could do it from your bike. So you put your hands on what's the long bar in the center?
On the top tube? Yeah.
Top tube?
Yeah.
It's called a tube?
Yeah.
Okay. So you put your hands there, and then, you would do kind of like a stretch back, like hands there and then extending back with the legs and, pedaling the feet a little bit. And that would help to really lengthen out the calf muscles. And then you do another lunge with, the opposite leg, and then you come forward fold. And so that is basically a sun salutation in a nutshell. But you can do all those poses without having to do like the synchronized movement. So I would definitely encourage a forward bend and a back bend. And one of my favorite forward bends, which is also calming and cooling. So if you're out on a bike tour in August, this is a good one to remember. Or if you're just really frustrated, this is a good one. And it's just a standing forward fold. So open your feet hip width apart, take a slight bend in your knees, fold forward. You can let the arms hang like a rag doll. You can rest hands into the crooks of the arms, which I actually prefer that because it's a little more weight, and then just kind of rocking side to side. And to open up those shoulders, in addition, bring arms behind the back, interlace your hands, and bring those arms up and over. So that one's really great for shoulders, hamstrings, and calves.
Yeah, I'll see you do that almost every day. Even if you're not going to do a practice, I'll see you do that. And it sort of just gets you opened up. And I've noticed that if you don't get a yoga practice in, that's the bare minimum kind of thing that you do. The other thing that I think, just from my personal experience, is that I'll do that often when I get off of a bike after, let's say I do a 60, 70 mile day, which is with a loaded bike about as long as I typically go. I've gone more, but I'll do a forward fold just, being in the saddle and having your back being in that kind of unnatural position for so long that can really help release things, especially the trick that is part of yoga that you do a lot, just really slowly going up, as you say, one vertebra at a time as you rise out of that forward fold. I'm telling you, bike touring folks, that is really, really, really incredible for just releasing all of the stress that you put on your body during the day. And at the very least, that's something you don't need to be, you don't need to have a yoga studio membership. You don't need to have a lot of knowledge, but just doing some of these things can really help take care of a lot of the crooks and cranks of a typical ride. So that can be really helpful. What would you say is, I often hear people who don't have a lot of exposure to yoga say yoga is just sort of glorified stretching. What would you say is sort of the difference between those things?
Well, I'd say glorified stretching is how some people may view yoga, which is fine. And I think the actual practice of yoga, though, it's a blend of really pulling together the mind and body. So there's this sense of connection to the breath. There's this intentionality behind it. There's compassion towards yourself, towards others. That's why I think a little yoga before you get on your bike is always good. Because even, earlier today, I ran into one of my teachers who pulled this kind of tricky maneuver on her bike. And I saw her before I ran into her at the studio. And I was like, that was a stealth move. And she was like, yeah, I never know if that's right or not. And we were talking about how no matter what mode of transportation or vehicle you're on, whether you are walking, I guess that's not really a vehicle, but whether you're on feet or on bike or in your car, you're always the one who's right. It's like the other person's always wrong. And so, we were just talking about that and the importance really of being a good biker, and having good etiquette. And I think too that these practices, beyond this glorified stretching, it can set you up to be more compassionate when you are on your bike. And that might seem silly, but if you've ever dealt with city biking, or I'm sure those of you bike touring, you run into all sorts of interesting people. And I think it can set you up for success in that way, really from just like, an interpersonal experience.
Yeah, totally. You've become quite the bike commuter in recent years. I mean, when we first met, you didn't even own a bike, I think, when we first met. Not at all.
No, it had been the tire. I used to pin it up out front and lock it up out front. And then on one Valentine's Day, somebody took my tire. And so I just got rid of my bike.
You got rid of your bike.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so sad. I didn't know that story.
Yeah.
But now we've both had our bikes stolen in our own hallway.
Multiple times.
So sad. I'm curious what your experience as a bicycle commuter, has that had any impact on your yoga? We've been talking about yoga's impact on biking. I'm wondering if your biking has had impact on your yoga.
Well, the one thing I would say is if I notice if I haven't biked, like say I decide to walk to the office, a 30-minute walk rather than a 15-minute bike ride, I notice that the next time I get on my bike, it's like a totally different experience. Not that you have to remember how to ride it, but just that my thighs, my quads, have to work a little harder. And so I would say, if anything, it probably tightens me up a little bit. The biking does, kind of like if anyone's a runner. And then whenever you go to do your yoga practice, the good thing is if you're pretty stretchy or bendy like I am, it kind of tightens you back up, making there be a little bit more resistance with your yoga, which is actually really nice.
That's really good. I never thought about it that way. We've often talked about runners at the yoga studio. Full disclosure, I work at the yoga studio too. But yeah, of course, biking would do the same. Let's say somebody is looking forward to a multi-week tour or a multi-day tour sometime this season. And they're looking to get into shape and they're considering yoga to be a part of it. What would be your recommendation for sort of integrating yoga into sort of their plan for prep work to physically get in shape for a ride?
If possible, I'd encourage going to classes, just to get started. I mean, of course, you can watch YouTube and try it at home, but there's something about a live teacher. And of course, you could do private sessions, you could do group classes. But the thing about that is you get a little bit more attention, hands-on experience that you can't get from a YouTube video. And that might set you up too for feeling more empowered to do it on your own when you are on tour. And then once you know what you like, what feels good, what works well with your body, maybe taking some of those favorite poses and creating a before biking ritual and a post biking ritual. And I think, even if it's just 5 minutes, but something that just allows you to kind of stretch out the body, open up the body, again, setting those intentions. And then, at the end, the great thing about the end of a yoga class is there's shavasana. So, it's like giving yourself the ability to really kind of work some things out. Like you said, with the stretching, the opening after you've been in that forward motion so long, doing a nice juicy back bend of just even standing upright, hands behind back, lifting arms up. That's a back bend. It's opening up the heart center. And that's a wonderful way to end. And then maybe just taking like a seat and just feeling your body and your breath for a few minutes before you set up camp or go get dinner or whatever it is you're going to do next.
Yeah. Shavasana, for everybody who's not super familiar with yoga, is called corpse pose, which is literally you're just lying down, resting, sort of absorbing what the practice felt like. Think about it this way. It's sort of like after a really long climb and you've got no energy left and you're taking a break at the top of up the hill, the mountain, whatever. It's sort of like that.
Yeah. And so why sit there? Why not I'm just going to get off my bike. I'm going to go lie down in the grass for a few minutes and just let this all soak in.
Yeah.
That can be a great way really to connect with nature, which is a form of spirituality for many people, and to give your body a little breather.
I never thought about that, doing a shavasana after a climb. I think I'm going to have to do that at some point. One other thing that I think is really interesting about yoga is you learn a lot about your body and how your body reacts. And there's one element in yoga that are counter poses. So after you are, especially in yin yoga, which is a type of yoga where you get really deeply into connective tissue. But then when you're done doing something where you're doing a really deep back bend or something like that, one of my favorites is called seal pose, where you put your arms out and you're sort of arching your back way back. If you have back problems, I do not recommend this.
Right.
But what's really cool is that as soon as you come out of it, having taken classes from you, Kimberly, you immediately say, okay, well, now we're going to go into the counter. And so you've got that feeling of having been in a back bend for a while, but you start to know what that sensation feels like. And then when you go into the counter, that would be probably a forward fold. All of a sudden, it really releases it. And I think from a bicycle touring perspective, that is a huge lesson for me. So when I'm feeling an ache or I've got some kind of a feeling where I've been in a position for a long time, I kind of naturally know now, because of the yoga I've taken, how to counter that feeling. And that's been such a huge piece of avoiding injury for me, I think, and one of the real important elements of yoga. And I'm just curious if it's easy to sort of say what are some real typical counter poses if you're feeling stress in a part of your back, for instance, which I think is a pretty typical thing for a biker. What would be the kind of things that you would suggest for a counter?
Yeah. Well, thinking about the various things that one feels on the bike, there is all that forward kind of hunching, right? So, to be able to do something like what I picture is lying on your back, so this is kind of towards the end, or you take a break at the top of the hill, you lie on your back and if you have even like a small towel or something that you could roll and place under your shoulder blades. So for women, like where the bra line is. For guys, under shoulder blades is what we're talking about. And what that does is it really opens up through the chest and heart center. Try to get those shoulders on the ground. And, even if it's just like a little hand towel, it'd be so, so great. So that is like a nice counter pose, also a restorative one after you've been in that forward motion. So just noticing like what feels kind of stuck and tight, and then how can I open that up and counter the position I've been in like for the past many hours.
Yeah. And it's funny because as you were saying this, I was thinking, oh, well, I guess, you'd have to bring some props with you. I was like, no, you don't. If you are bike touring and you're camping along the way, you've got all sorts of different things that you could use. Your sleeping bag perhaps might be a little bit too bulky, but certainly something like your air mattress, if that's rolled up, if you've got a closed cell foam air mattress, that's almost like a yoga mat right there. I think a friend of the show, Michael Risica, actually, he travels with a yoga mat and uses that as part of his sleeping kit, I think. So, there's all sorts of different ways that you can integrate all of this in. So that's really great.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I was like, initially, I was like a yoga block. And I'm like, who is biking with a yoga block? So that's why I thought, just a hand towel, you might have that to like wipe sweat or something.
I'm trying to think how you could turn a bike helmet into a yoga block safely, and I'm not sure if I can come up with that.
Yeah.
Maybe if you have a very blocky helmet or a very, very, very secure helmet. I wanted to note at this point that when we alluded to it before, that Kimberly has graciously offered to have an audio yoga practice of her with her dulcet tones as a part of sort of this offering that we've got in the Pedalshift project. So if you go to the Pedalshift project's show notes page, you will be able to get and download a free yoga practice from Kimberly. So thank you for that.
Of course.
Really appreciate that. I also wanted to mention there are some great resources out there. I mean, you got the Google. I think everybody out here knows how to use the Google. And there's some really good resources out there for yoga and bicycling, but actually yoga and bike touring as well. So go check those out. And I also have this great zine by Kelly Reefer. I hope I'm pronouncing it. If it's not Reefer, it's Refer or Refer, but Pedal, Stretch, and Breathe. It's a great zine that was put out by Taking the Lane Media, our friend Ellie Blue out there in Portland, Oregon, and Joe Beal as well. And this was the quote unquote first guide to bicycling and yoga. It's really fantastic. I got this a couple of years ago, and I find it to be a really great resource. And you've flipped through it, Kimberly. You thought it looked pretty good.
Yeah, it's great. It's great.
So go check that out and go support good independent media. That's from Taking the Lane Media. Go check that out as well. So Kimberly, thank you so much. Do you have any like sort of final takeaways, anything that maybe we didn't talk about in the context of utilizing yoga as a tool in bicycle touring?
Yeah, I would say, the final kind of takeaway that I just would love to leave your listeners with is to let the yoga practice or let the incorporation of yoga be whatever you want it to be. There's no right or wrong. So, even as you said, it could be as simple as one pose. It could be like a 15-minute ritual that you do before. It could be that you have an hour practice before, or it could be that you just do a shavasana at the top of many hills, and so whatever kind of resonates for you and your body. And the great thing about yoga, again, beyond glorified stretching, is I think it does get you more in touch with your body and ideally more in touch with your kind of body, kind of mind and emotions as a whole.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I've always thought yoga and bicycle touring goes together really, really well, like peanut butter and jelly or something like that. So I really want to thank you for bringing your expertise and your insight to the show. Thanks so much.
Happy to. Thank you.
Thank you for joining. You can find Pedalshift at pedalshift.net for more great bicycle touring content. You can hear the Pedalshift project through Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. Opening music courtesy of Jason Kent off his self-titled album. The track is called America. Check out his band Sunfield's latest release, Mono Mono, wherever cool music is available.